Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andreea Groenendijk-Deveau, and I am the founder and CEO of Renard Group, a UK-based tech for good company active in the philanthropy sector. I'm also an ambassador for the Romanian Diversity Chamber of Commerce, the reason we are all here today, and of course, a keen supporter of equality, diversity, and inclusion in business and otherwise. This webinar is organized by the Romanian Diversity Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Dentons and HR Club. I am delighted to be a part of this very important conversation today. I am Romanian and have lived both in Romania and abroad. I see significant changes in the Romanian economy and society, from topics such as the ones today coming to the front of business leaders' agendas to systemic changes that are beginning to take place. Yet, there is still a lot of work to be done. For example, while Romania may boast one of the lowest gender pay gaps in the EU, around 5%, women are still disproportionately involved in family life, thus having lower chances to develop long-term successful careers. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, adjustments for people with disabilities, for example, are still in their infancy, and we are still seeing significant discrimination against minorities such as the LGBT+ and the Roma communities. So yes, there is a lot of work to be done, and businesses can be trailblazers in that field. I have with me 5 great speakers today: Yolanda Umpiérrez Alvarez, a global I&D function, services enabler and projects lead at Accenture. Welcome. We have Ivan Janković, people and culture delivery manager, Ikea Southeast Europe, Romania, Croatia, Serbia, Ukraine, and Slovenia at Ikea Group. Welcome. We have Tudor Havriliuk, former vice president for HR at Facebook. We have Serge Offers, CFO and member of the board at ING Romania. And last but not least, we have Doina Filip, head of reward and HR budget at Orange Romania. Welcome all. We are very happy to have you. Thank you for joining this event. And having said that, please allow me to introduce Lestat Monroe, founder and board member of the Romanian Diversity Chamber of Commerce. Lestat, how did you come to think of such an initiative? What is the agenda, and how are businesses reacting to your organization so far?
Thank you, Andrea. With the strong support of the major international corporates, we have launched last year in October the Diversity Chamber of Commerce. In extraordinary circumstances of pandemics and of creation of social movements that we've been appearing online, like Black Lives Matter, we often hear that it cannot be done, that diversity and inclusion, it's a problematic in Romania. Well, guess what? It is being done. It's been done successfully by a wide range of international corporates, and some of them are part of our speakers today: ING, Orange, Ikea, and Accenture, and other members of our chamber. I'm so glad to see that so many of you are participating to the first edition of our ED&I webinar, and I hope that these events will become soon a yearly must-to-be. I hope that you're going to enjoy this webinar as much as I will, and let you present the next person.
Thank you for that, Lestat. We have Dana Cavaleru, Executive Director for HR Club and our partner for this event. If you could tell us a few words about why you've joined this initiative. I think you're muted, Dana.
Sorry, it's still happening after 1 year of webinars. Sorry for that. So I'm representing HR Club. Majority of people here knows me. We are the Professional Association of HRs in Romania, and I will try to be as brief as possible because you're not here to listen to me. When I first started to discuss with Lestat about an event on diversity and inclusion, my first idea was to start sharing real best practices on D&Y. A significant part of our community showed interest in doing more on this topic, and I'm very happy that today we will have the chance to learn from the experience of different companies and leaders right after my introduction speech. I believe there is a lot of things to be done, as you mentioned in the beginning, Andrea, in shaping D&I reality in Romania, in shaping HR policies and practices. And it's a great interest of our HR department in doing so. So we need ideas, practical ideas to be implemented. There is, but I have to mention, it's a specific area where we are doing good. This is women in top executive position. I just heard a few weeks ago that Romania is the first in Europe, with 32% of women in top executive position. This not include the pay gap, okay? But we are there, so it's a good start for us in Romania. But I'm also aware that on the other pillars of D&Y, we are not doing so great. So we need to learn more on how to address unconscious bias, how to make diversity and inclusion really work in organizational practices. So that's why I know a lot of HRs are here today. They want to do things, they want to start doing more, and they want to know how. So I want to thank also from my side for the great speaker we have today, for being so open in sharing their experience, and I will be a very attentive participant today. Thank you. Back to you, Andreea.
Thank you so much, Dana. Wonderful to have you. Before we go on to my guests, a reminder that we have an option at the bottom of your screen for you to ask questions. Please do so and introduce yourself so that we know who you are and potentially what company you're with. Now on to my guest, Yolanda Umpiérrez Alvarez of Accenture. I'll start with a more general question. What does it mean to be inclusive?
Hi, Andrea. Thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you today to share a bit, because I&D itself is a huge space about some key concepts and about our own Accenture strategy. A couple of weekends ago, and let's go to the next slide, please. I share at home with my two kids. I have a son who is 15 and a daughter who is 9, that a new member had joined the team and that he was transgender. I was expecting some kind of reaction, as at least to me, it is not something that happens every day. And after a few seconds of silence, my son came back saying, "But Mom, this is not something weird or unusual, is it? I have quite a few colleagues at the school who are either transgender, bisexual, or lesbian. Why are you sharing as if it was great news?" And you know what? That really made me think about how the world is changing and how companies like ours need to react and to move in terms of inclusion and diversity at the same speed as the new generations coming next. And I could not feel prouder of my son when I heard him saying so, as I could also notice how much respect he felt for those colleagues. And I wanted to start sharing this experience with you, as it's on our side that we can make a significant impact in our work environments to make them more diverse, inclusive, and equal. So let's start by these two concepts, diversity and inclusion.
Why don't we just have a more general conversation in the meantime, because the anecdote with your son was incredibly interesting. We are looking at a very different approach from the younger generation, and things that may have looked different to us are completely normal to them. So perhaps the change will come from that generation to ours. They might be able to shape something in the future. But how do we work with the slightly older generations, Yolanda? How do we instill that sense of normality to them?
I think that is a very cultural piece, Andrea, that we need to start building from the very inside, because as you say, in our organizations, we have people from very different ages and very different generations. So all we need is getting aligned also and making the old generations know what the new generations are expecting. And in that sense, it's kind of a mindset change, what we need to drive internally in our organizations. That is one of the pieces that we are currently working on within Accenture. I think it's a cultural change and keeping an eye on what the new generations bring in, how they think, how they behave, how they expect inclusion and diversity to be lived in their day-to-day work.
So how do you pick your diversity and inclusion manager in a company to make sure they reflect both the meeting of the worlds? Because of course you have to have that balance, right? You have to bring together the generations so that there's no friction, that there's an understanding on both sides, and there's a sort of meeting in the middle somehow. Does Accenture have an ED&I manager or whatever the function, the position might be? And how do they interact with the rest of the company?
Well, we used to run a mindset change sessions within Accenture for managers and above in order to drive unconscious bias. And I'm probably going one step further in the presentation because we have learning sessions for all the levels, and considering what the new generations need is also pretty much connected to the unconscious bias piece. So we not only run specific learning sessions to keep and to build the awareness, but we also provide them with the tools. We have different toolkits that they can use in order to educate themselves and to educate their teams on how they should behave within their projects.
Well, I will ask this question of all the speakers. While we're still waiting for your presentation to come up, I want to give you the chance to show your slides because they are, I've seen them and they're incredibly interesting. But I will ask this question of all the speakers, including yourself. Companies can be at the forefront of change because, you know, when there is that pressure, economic pressure, things can change. But on a societal level, how do we start to instill that change? How do we, where do we start? Should it be in school? Should it be in families? On top of the change that business can make?
I will see if any of my colleagues want to step in, for not just me being the one leading.
And actually, maybe I can top that up with a question that came in from our attendees. How can we facilitate intergenerational conversations where young people are teaching reverse mentoring the senior generation regarding tolerance and inclusion? This is from Andreea Bria. Thank you, Andreea. Brilliant question. Shall we look at that for a second while we're trying to sort our technical issues?
At least we in Accenture, Andreea, we have employee resource groups, which are indeed in order to do that, right? To bring people with a common interest, with a common age, a common characteristic. They are brought together in order to share and also to highlight what are the needs that they have. And also our local HR point of contacts are key in helping us driving the change because they are really the ones in charge of their teams and in permanent touch with the employees. So having groups, having forums where people can openly share their thoughts and their needs, I think that's key to just cascade all the messages through the entire organization.
Thank you, Yolanda. Doina, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, it's a little bit similar with what Yolanda said. In Orange, Romania, for example, we have a dedicated space on intranet. We have exchange in ideas, conversations. We have dedicated programs. We have groups. We are talking about different things. And what I want to tell you also is the fact that we do not make a force awareness. The main message is that we are different, and this is great. It's the most important gift that we received from the nature. So I think it's important to create a space for discussions and relations, but in the same time, do not push too much. Let's help the atmosphere, the culture to grow in a natural way, adopting the different people. Okay, we are different, but we are humans. So,
thank you, Doina.
This is from us.
Thank you. Ivan, do you want to add to that?
It's interesting to see if company is inclusive when it comes to generations. And nowadays I can see it in many business environments that you can have Generation Z representative working closely with someone from Generation X or baby boomer even. And then it's, I can say it's tough for some companies, and it's tough for the businesses to consciously include, but I think we've mentioned it, create the space, create the environment when everybody feels invited and when everyone feels okay to share, because everybody's point of view is important. We're coming with the new generations joining with different needs at the business environment, but at the same time, we also have co-workers that have, I would say, traditional needs at business, and we need to respect all of them. How to ensure this? We can. I hope we will hear more of the examples during the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Tudor?
Thank you so much for having me, by the way. This is a fantastic opportunity for all of us to meet and talk about the incredible work that the Romanian Diversity Chamber of Commerce is doing, and really pushing us to think deeply about how we can implement changes that are ultimately going to benefit our businesses and our societies as a whole. And on that note, I think if you'd like me to actually pause and let Yolanda just get started with her presentation, I can finish my thought in 20 seconds. Here.
Yeah, please answer the question.
Yeah.
Please answer the question, and then yes, we'll go to Yolanda.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, I think it's really important for us to have committed leadership teams inside of businesses committed to the idea of diversity. And I think all of us, especially those who are in the HR or people function at our companies, is important for us to have those conversations with leadership, because there is a lot of pressure from the, let's call it from the bottom, from the people that are just entering the workforce, to see that their values, which are values of diversity and inclusion, are very much the values of the companies that they're joining. So I think from a attraction and retention business case, it's really critical for companies to adapt their cultures to people who are just starting out in their careers and who just expect this from their employer. So there's definitely a business case there to be made. And the last thing I'll say on that point is, there seems to be a very clear correlation between businesses that embrace diversity, embrace inclusion, allow everybody to be seen and heard, and their performance. The chamber, together with this incredible organization called Open for Business, just released a study yesterday talking about this correlation and how, as a country, when you have more businesses that are inclusive and diverse, the per capita GDP numbers change by $3,000 per capita in GDP for more open and inclusive societies. So both at a macroeconomic and at an individual business level, there's absolutely a fantastic business case to be made of why this topic is so important, and why the leadership of the company should be really pushing this change throughout the business.
Thank you for that, Tudor, and I can't wait to come back to that topic, because it's very interesting to sort of see how leadership may accept the changes that are coming from the bottom, considering it will potentially personally affect them, and they will have to understand that in order to be diverse, you can't have a board full of white men anymore. So someone will have to, see their position to someone else, and so on and so forth. So we'll come back to that. I will now go to Yolanda. Yolanda, apologies for the slide delay. We did get some interesting insights in the meantime. Let's kindly go back to your presentation. Tell us about what inclusion means for yourself and for your company.
Can we go directly to slide number 4, please? There we go. So as I was saying, to me and also to Accenture as a whole, I think diversity and inclusion are often used in tandem, while they are different somehow, right? And this is understandable. And one is necessary in order to achieve the other. But as I say, they are two different concepts. Diversity refers to a workplace that's made up of people from different ages, cultural backgrounds, geographies, physical abilities, religions, genders, or sexual orientation. And true workforce diversity, however, goes even beyond these social categories. It includes all the elements that make individual employees unique from one another, their perspectives, their preferences, their characteristics, and even their biases. While inclusion is more about belonging and about positively striving to meet the needs of different people and taking deliberate action to create environments where everyone feels respected and able to achieve their full potential. Next, please. In other words, diversity is about the what, while inclusion is about the how. And both concepts go hand by hand. After all, you can increase your diversity hiring efforts in order to reach your workforce diversity goals all you like. If you don't have a culture that ensures everyone feels welcome, it won't have the expected impact, and you won't be able to retain your diversity. Every organization is in a different part of the journey, as it's an ongoing process, and having specific goals for diversity and inclusion and even regularly measuring process is just key. I would look to a few indicators. Does the leadership of your organization reflect the available talent pool in the marketplace? Are women and people of color advancing at the same rates as white men? Do your hires reflect the available skilled talent in the market across all the roles? Do your practices, your pay practices, support pay equity? Do all your employees feel like they are treated fairly? And is the organization committed to advancing diversity and inclusion? Next, please. So becoming the most inclusive and diverse company in the world continues to be central to our strategy. Accenture has gone through a meaningful journey, starting at 1995, when we launched our first global I&D strategy, until 2020, when we launched our global mental wellness program, and we announced ethnicity-related workforce mix goals and mandatory anti-racism training in US, UK, and South Africa. Today, I think there are many reasons why inclusion and diversity are essential in our business and can have a huge impact on it in the short and in the long term. It's about greater innovation and creativity, wider range of skills, the business being boosted, happier employees, increased productivity, better understanding of our customers, more talent to choose from, higher revenues. Next, please. And there is also a third concept that I would like to mention, which is equality. Equality means treating people fairly and ensuring they have equal opportunity to make the most of their lives and talents. Next slide, please. And one of the effects of the global pandemic has been the increase of inequalities all across the globe. Equality is required probably more than ever now, and companies like ours are strongly contributing to accelerating equality in the workplace. We in Accenture have renewed our commitment to equality, not limited it just to gender. As I mentioned before, our people identify themselves in many different ways, and intersectionality is just key to create work environment where everybody feel like they can be themselves both inside and outside of work. I still see the previous slide. I don't know if it's just me. Can we go to slide number 8, please? There we go. So when thinking about the steps that we are taking in Accenture to build a culture of equality, I immediately go right back to the roadmap that we have defined, which has 4 main pillars. The first pillar is bold leadership, which is about having commitment from the very top, setting clear goals, holding leaders accountable, and being very clear that our commitment to diversity and to a culture of equality are business priorities, just like any other business priorities. The second pillar is comprehensive actions. It's about programs and policies, making sure that we have the right ones in place, and that's everything from having the right employee resources group, as I was mentioning before, to things like parental leaves. The third pillar is empowering environment, which means that people can bring their whole selves to work, and that not only do we make sure that the great diversity in our workforce is reflected at our leadership tables, but that those who are at the leadership table not only have a seat there, but they also have a voice. And the fourth pillar is about clients and partners. It's about engaging them to drive measurable change in local communities, as well as to bring I&D to life in our client work and position as a key driver of value creation. So this is about the framework. What about the programs we are running? As you can see here, there are multiple, and they have all been designed to enhance work and life experiences and with a clear purpose within each of the segments. By doing exactly what? For instance, for Pride, we are building programs and networks, growing the number of allies, extending self-ID capabilities, and championing equality in same-sex benefits. For mental health and wellness, we are breaking the workplace stigma on mental health and conditions, providing easy access to a specific training or launching new tools to support our people. For disability inclusion, we are recruiting more people with disabilities, we are providing accommodation experience, we are driving accessibility across all our technology-enabled platforms, or we are also engaging our people, clients, and suppliers on the journey. For gender, as you might know, we have a 50-50 goal to achieve by 2025, and we are also trying to grow the number of managing director females, closely monitoring data and providing targeted development opportunities for our women at critical career points. Next slide, please. And I already mentioned, and we also mentioned that in the previous discussion, that biases have an influence in inclusion and diversity. Let me just put in front of you 4 examples, real ones. A military veteran seeking a marketing position at a bank is told that he would be more suited for a security position. Second situation, passengers become nervous at the sight of a female airline pilot. Third situation, a new father must justify to his employer why he deserves parental leave. And the fourth, a woman's passion for coding is met with skepticism from her team members. Such biases can affect our personal and our work lives. And while we know that diverse teams help drive innovation, we might still hold certain deeply ingrained beliefs or stereotypes that can involuntarily shape our judgments about people's character, abilities, and potential. And that is exactly what unconscious bias, also known as implicit bias, means. Next slide, please. But unconscious biases are different to conscious, which are explicit biases, which are intentionally discriminative. We are fully aware of those and how they influence our decision making. And we as human beings are naturally biased. Even when we intend to be completely fair, our brains have a hard time remaining impartial. And some researchers indicate that our brains naturally use bias to subconsciously achieve our goals. We instinctively place people into categories such as skin color, weight, age, gender, accent, education, sexuality, or status. And categorizing people in such a way can lead us to make untrue assumptions about them. For businesses and companies like ours, there is a clear reason to challenge unconscious bias. If we act on or experience it in the workplace, it means that we are prevented from acting in the best interests of the business. And the cost to the business can be significant in terms of missing out on potential talent, an inability to assess certain risk or to make the most ethical decisions about change, or even missing out opportunities to exploit new markets effectively. Next, please. But the good news, because there is also good news here, is that we all have the capacity to change or to rewrite our people preferences, but first we need is to acknowledge that they exist. The problem is that many organizations aren't inclusive and they aren't even aware of it. In the workplace, it all starts with recruitment, with hiring. Research has shown that traditional hiring methods that rely on CVs and unstructured interviews open the door for all of our unconscious biases. So arbitrary aspects, such as the candidate's name, the appearance, or even the way of talking can affect how their ability to do the job is judged. And this often results in the wrong person getting a job. And that influence of the unconscious bias continues even after recruitment. If someone that doesn't fit actually makes it into an organization, the unconscious biases of their colleagues can make things really difficult. So at this point, you might be wondering, next slide, please. How can we combat unconscious bias in the workplace? Fortunately, there is a lot we can do. Changing the way our workplace operates can ensure unconscious biases aren't able to affect individuals. It involves analyzing all the different steps of our processes and plans, and in doing so, we can work out how bias might influence actions. And from there, we can gold-plate our business's approach to ensure it's bias-free. And that might even mean blind recruitment processes, gender-neutral job ads, training our professionals, or making our workforce more representative. In addition to adopting new methods or way of working, we in Accenture have also put in place learning programs such as Unconscious Bias, Mitigating It Together, which is a personalized interactive documentary style learning experience enable each of us to test our attitudes and beliefs and to learn from the experiences of others. We have also implemented role-playing simulations where individuals examine and respond to behaviors and attitudes. There are several scenarios available designed to present stereotyped bias exchanges and exposing the user to what it feels like to be excluded. We have also created lots of awareness campaigns to mitigate biases, and with a split on what you can do and what the teams can do. And there are two that you might probably have heard of in particular, which have had a great impact. One is Inclusion Starts with I, and the other Be Conscious. And we have also designed toolkits for team leads to educate themselves and to provide them with the talking points that they need to address the topic with others. Next slide, please. And let me just end up with two of my favorite inspiring quotes. This is the first one. People will forget what you say, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And to me, that is exactly the overall and the final purpose of any inclusion and diversity agenda, being able to positively influence how people act and how people feel. And the second inspiring quote, go to the next, please, is from Henry Ford. Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is a progress, and working together is success. As we in HR, we wouldn't be able to drive any inclusion and diversity agenda without our employees and our community members' help, right? The role that each individual plays is just key to make things happen. Building an inclusive environment is something that we are continuously contributing to. And we all have a voice when it comes to I&D, and we must all take full responsibility for what we say and for how we behave. And the great thing about the so many dimensions that we have in Accenture, and probably that also happens in many of your companies, we have the services, we have the markets, we have the industry networks, and we have the business groups, is that we can also impact inclusion and diversity from all of those. So all I would say is that let's keep in mind that inclusion starts with I, with everyone's small but huge at a time daily actions. And that's all from my side. So over to you, Andreea, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. I have two questions for you. First one is, how do you have those difficult conversations when you see biases in your colleagues? Because of course you want to be positive about it, but you also need to instill change. So how do you make them aware in a gentle way as a manager or as a colleague? And how do you work with them towards, you've given some example, but how do you work towards a positive outcome where there's the least amount of friction?
I think the positive outcome always comes, Andreea, where you are put in that real situation. So experiencing yourself, how you feel when someone is excluding you or categorizing you in such a way that you are not perceived as you really are, is the way that you really realize that you are probably doing that same thing in other cases and in your daily interactions with people. So my recommendation always here is, rather than writing things on a paper, is putting people in front of real situations, and that is part of those trainings that I was mentioning before, or even the toolkits. So as much as possible, take them into the real space.
And how do you address an issue like that before, let's say, it becomes an official HR issue, before it becomes a real problem for the person who has that bias, who has that unacceptable behavior, but they're unaware of what they're doing, who should take it upon themselves to pull them to the side or have a conversation with them and say, hey, this isn't okay? And how do you do that in a gentle way?
When it comes to HR, it's not anything official yet, because the way we understand the HR function is being close to the employees and getting to know what is really happening. So if it's just to try managing it at the first stage, it should always be discussed with our local HR teams, right? Then we have some other higher stages to go through if the situation even becomes worse. But I would say that the very first stage, the person should very openly go to the HR teams, to the local ones, and reach out to them in case they are, experiencing something which is not the right thing to do.
Okay, and my second question to you is, as we know, companies were reluctant to work with people remotely before the pandemic. So therefore, people with disabilities or long-term health issues were automatically excluded from a lot of opportunities because they couldn't do the 9 to 5. They couldn't be present in the office. How has the pandemic changed companies' outlook on inclusion, considering now they've been forced to essentially experience this? And are we seeing companies being more open towards giving opportunities to people from that talent pool?
Well, we in particular on the disability inclusion front have a tool which we call a adjustment request tool, and the purpose of that is that every person who has any kind of different ability can very directly and automatically ask for whatever they need in terms of technical support or even human support to do their work. So we have automated that in such a way that everybody is aware that just going through the link, they can ask for whatever they need, and that will be immediately provided. And as you know, we in Accenture, the fact of working from home is not any new to us. We were already used to it. So what we are just trying to do is improving and becoming more efficient in providing our employees with all the resources that they need to better develop their work.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. On to our next guest, Ivan Janković of Ikea. Very interesting topic for your presentation today, leadership perspective on D&I. We were talking about it earlier. It's something that I think is incredibly interesting because yes, we see pressure from the bottom, but how do we instill change at the top? So I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Andreea, and thank you, Lestat, and the whole crew here today. I think it's important to raise awareness, speak about the topic, and I'm super happy to be here with you today. Yolanda, very inspiring presentation. I really love the energy you bring into the topic, and I'm super thankful to be here today to listening to you. When we speak about the leadership perspective on the particular topic, I have two angles in mind, and I apologize, I don't have a presentation. I would love to make it an inclusive talk, and maybe different colleagues can also jump in and discuss the topic. But when it comes to the leadership perspective of this, Yolanda mentioned that enabling a voice of ED&I responsible or someone who's driving the agenda to be on the management table. It's not necessarily a sit in a management team, but I've also seen different approaches to how companies enable and secure diversity and inclusion agenda within their organization. So usually, and this is the case today, I can see it's set somewhere in HR organization. Sometimes I see it within corporate communications team or marketing simply because of the potential of positioning. But I've also noticed examples of this responsibility being added to someone holding a different business position in an organization. And sometimes that person being on a higher management level. Regardless of an organization structure, internal structure, I think what makes a difference is enabling the voice to be heard. So enabling a channel that will feed information, raise topic, and being able to, from top, govern and direct and enable movement. Later on, I will bring an example of a friend from a different company, how they enable certain movement within gender equality topic. But I would also like to bring here a topic of leaders, managers, and people leaders, and importance of them being your ED&I ambassadors in a company. Why is it so? Leaders are the ones who have major impact on the main people processes. So from recruitment, development, talent succession, leaders daily set the tone of a team atmosphere, will it be inclusive or not. So if leaders in any organization lack capabilities, skills, or even motivation in the ED&I area, this will also be reflected in the everyday life of a co-worker in the organization. So how do we see it in Ikea? I think from the perspective of recruitment, but also when it comes to the leadership development, I think the topic of equality, diversity, and inclusion is built into the development modes and development playlists for all the leaders, people leaders, and I think it creates and makes a huge difference. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to raise it, like Andreea, you or anyone from
Same for the attendees. We would love to hear from our attendees for our panelists. Okay, so Ivan, we were saying it earlier. There's when it comes to leadership, there's not a lot of diversity. There's not a lot of inclusion. How do you slowly change that with actionable steps? How do you get a group of people in a boardroom, which unfortunately so many times they all look similar to each other, so to speak, similar age, similar ethnicities, similar backgrounds? How do you instill that change? Is it, I mean, we know, for example, that the millennials as stakeholders have put a lot of pressure on companies. They will not buy from companies that aren't sustainable or aren't open to making changes in the ED&I space. Investors are now putting a lot of pressure in that space. However, change is lagging. We're seeing some change, and of course everybody's putting out press releases and flaunting their numbers. However, we are very far from seeing an equitable environment when it comes to the leadership positions. So is it a combination of changing generations and pressure from stakeholders, or are there any other solutions that you can think of that you could share with us?
Well, I can share the experience from Ikea and how we do it inside. And what I'm thankful for being part of an Ikea organization is that the topic of equality, diversity, and inclusion is built into the value system that there's driving force behind what Ikea stands for as a brand, as a business, and then again as a people company. At the end of the day, or at the beginning of the day, what's driving Ikea is making everyday life better for the many people, and then many people outside of Ikea, but also many people inside Ikea. What helped us taking this topic on, I would say, on a higher level is introducing something that is called Equality Plan. It's more than a document, but it is a document to start with. What dimensions of equality, diversity, inclusions do you look into as an organization? Then how do you measure them? And then it drives also actions behind. Sometimes actions will be tailor-made to the market, because not every market is the same. We do have different inequalities in different markets, and then different struggles in different markets. So the actions will follow, but then the base is the same. What are we aiming for? How do we measure it? And then it will come, how do we get there? And I can say that this document, it's not in the hands of HR. So it's not in hands of a one person, but it is a company document that is signed by the top management of a company and then organization. And then it's everybody's responsibility. So the management, the people leaders, but then every other coworker, because this is the house that we build for ourselves, but also the visitors and the customers that come in.
specifically, how do you ensure a diverse workforce? How do you ensure diversity and inclusion at the top? If you could give me some examples, do you have quotas? Do you have what Yolanda mentioned, blind recruitment processes? And the second part of that question is, how do you, once you've have your own house in order, so to speak, and you're starting to be happy with the results, how do you instill that change on to the other providers you work with, or your whole ecosystem? Do you have those discussions with your providers? Do you how do you role model? How do you push them to move in that space?
Thanks for that question. I think it's also important because it's a whole ecosystem. You cannot change in one element and then do the business with other entities that do not share the same values, right? Or you can, but then you're not making a change in society. For us, of course, like as I said, equality plan is a set of documents. So to start with, what is the most common element of it is gender equality. And then, of course, we have quotas. Our goal is 50-50, but not only on the manager levels, what I can see, but 50-50 on all levels and in all functions, because functions are the ones that are also to be looked into, particularly predominantly male supply chain or fulfillment, and then on the other side, predominantly female HR or people oriented functions. So what do? We set specific goals for each team, for each board, for each management group. How do we secure 50-50 on each level? And then how do we enable it? Of course, there are mechanisms to help us get there. It's recruitment, but it's talent succession. And then Yolanda mentioned this blind recruitment. Sometimes I can share from the company perspective, it helps, but blind recruitment also enables reflecting inequalities on the market. So sometimes we need to take active stand and look into the all elements and push towards something to get us onto the more equal base. And here is an example I can share, and I wanted to share previously from it's from a friend of mine shared it from a company, and it was regarding the gender equal pay in their company. They shared it was a huge gap when they started doing it, and then all the activities they had, it never led them like to a certain level until the day they brought it into the management discussion, and they decided that each bi-weekly top management meeting will start and end with a gender equal pay topic. And it took them 8 to 10 months to get to a goal that they prescribed. And then they were happy. But then you know what happened? 4 months later, it's like when you let things roll, they see the negative trend again. So you need to establish a system to follow up and keep certain numbers. And it's not a goal you reach, it's a journey you need to enable happening every day. Okay. And then when it comes to the, sorry for interruption, Andreea, when it comes to suppliers and then service providers, working in Ikea, it's an ecosystem of suppliers on one hand, but then service providers in order to make it happen. We have a process that has been, I would say, a process that has been live for the last 20 years, which requires our suppliers, but also our service providers, detailed instruction in, let's say, fair work, but also sharing the values through certain system. We aim for gender equal vendors whenever possible. We aim to work with companies that share our values and can prove through different set of initiatives that they are similar to Ikea. This is how you can lead a change in the societies.
Thank you for that. Do you feel that while you're trying to recruit for different positions that you want to fill from different talent pools, do you feel you have enough candidates? Are people empowered to come and apply for these positions or apply from within the company?
When the recruitment as such, it's and different talent pools, it's how to it's where actually it all starts, you know, and it's a process, ever-going process. How do you secure, how you use this mechanism as a tool that helps you as an organization to be more diverse, but also more inclusive. It starts with, as I said, recruitment can also, if not done properly, can also reflect the inequalities in societies. But then you first need to make sure that by reaching out to the pool of talents outside or inside, you're reaching the many, and then securing that people are feeling invited. Sometimes it's, and in most cases, it's not only about the job ad, but it's about the brand identity of an employer on the market. Sometimes it's a small talk between the people outside or inside an organization that sets the tone between people. How do you position as an employer when it comes to the topic of equality, diversity, and inclusion, which we all, I think, can confirm that it's day by day more important.
I'd like to go back to what we were discussing earlier, putting pressure on suppliers, collaborators, etc. And I want to ask this of all the panelists. Is it a company's responsibility to ensure that change takes place in their whole ecosystems? It's not a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing to do. Sometimes it can lead to business friction. However, if a company is thinking forward and is making changes within, does it then become their responsibility to make sure that the companies they interact with do the same? And I would love to hear from the other panelists too.
I should be able to speak now. Thanks, Lestat, for getting me into the call again. So I'm happy that.
Great to have you, Serge.
I think it is the responsibility, yeah? And I think what I see now, and I always take the parallel when it comes to climate change and sustainability, I think this is where we're much more front running, and also looking at the financial industry, that we have a very big obligation to support the transition, circular economy. And I think more and more, this is also what we're seeing and feeling the responsibility for when it comes to D&I. As just like for the other topics, we can have a very big impact here, not only via procurement, our own people, but also via our financing activities. I do think that it's the way that you do it. I don't believe this is something you can enforce with the stick. I think this is something where you need to actually have a continuous dialogue with the different stakeholders to create the awareness. And I think this is a longer term decision. And I think if we're able in each of the time we're interacting with people to change it step by step, I think this is the way that we're actually going to be able to change it. And I think this is for me more a marathon than a sprint. And in that marathon, I think, and for instance, myself, when it comes to D&I topics, I go with the commercial people and I actually have the discussion with clients about the importance and what we see and how they could change their business model in a better or at least more sustainable or more equal way. And I think these are sometimes very difficult discussions because people do not necessarily are aware of the way that they're operating, or maybe the way that they are excluding or not fully treating other people rightfully. So I think it's a very delicate balance, but I think it's our opportunity to create and to have the discussion and to push for the change.
And how do they react when you have those conversations?
I think sometimes it is different, and I think they react differently. I think for me, one of the just to give an example, for instance, and I take LGBT as an example. Many times I hear it's not a problem because nobody is judging, but they are, for instance, forgetting that it's not only about actively judging, but also if people feel that they cannot talk about their personal life because they are hiding or they don't feel comfortable sharing that they are either gay or lesbian, a lot of the discussions become difficult because you cannot discuss how was your weekend. You cannot take your family to a company barbecue. And I think these are sometimes the things when I see people's eyes open, that they were not aware that even by not actively maybe treating people badly or making it a topic, that by actually having it silenced, it's equally difficult for people that don't feel included or belonging in those teams. And I think this is step by step where we need to create that awareness. And I think I'm always happy if people indicate that they were unaware of that, and they were unaware that sometimes their actions or their inactions are creating trouble for others around them. And I think this is the way that we can change it. Slowly, but step by step.
Do you feel that once you've made people aware that something's wrong, they're open to change?
Yeah, I do notice, but this is sometimes I do notice they are aware, but I think there is always a little bit of a safety mechanism, which I hear many times. But this is how we are. It has always been like this. This is part of our culture, and I've been in many countries. So, and coming from the Netherlands, I always have the idea that people believe the Netherlands is a very open society. So everything is different in the Netherlands. I always tell them there is nothing different in the water. So I think people are equal wherever they are in the world. So I think the topics are also the same. And for instance, this is what I know, the openness needs to be there. I don't think you can make the change without having the openness. And this is, I think, the first step, to have that dialogue, whether it's in work, whether or not it's in family, it's in the sporting community. You need to be able to get it to the forefront and actually have that discussion. And sometimes that can be very awkward. And people do not want to have the discussion because it's easier to ignore. But I think this is for me the first time, and then I notice people are coming back. I'm thinking about it, and then I think I've hooked them, because if they start thinking about it, I think they become aware and they are willing to change in the end the behavior.
Thank you, Serge. I think this is a good time to talk about culture, at which point I'll go to Tudor and discuss creating a workplace culture that fosters diversity and inclusion. It may not be very visible when you're in a startup with 10 people, but it's definitely visible in massive companies that have thousands of employees. So that's when culture, a clear culture, really makes a massive difference, and people have to adhere to it, and there have to be people at the top who manage that, who put that plan together, and who make sure that everybody sort of plays their part in that culture. So do you want to talk us through it, Tudor?
Yeah, I think just like my opening remarks, I was saying you need to get the buy-in. If it's not already there, and if the leadership team is not already a driver of this, once you have the the buy-in of the leadership team, I feel like especially as an HR organization, what I've seen work the best is taking a complete look, a holistic look at the employee life cycle. Really starting with your employer brand and understanding how it's perceived right now from the D&I perspective, and whether or not it really needs to change, either to change to truly reflect the goals of the organization, the kinds of people that you want to hire, the kinds of people that you want to retain, and really how that spills into the recruiting process. I feel like this employer brand work needs to be done on a regular basis anyway, because our generational cohorts change, society's conversations change, and so it's a good exercise to do anyway. And at this stage of this topic being so hot in terms of what candidates expect a company to do, I've seen some terrific work some of the companies that are here on the panel today have done to really push this idea that they are very diverse, and that diversity takes so many types of forms, not just ethnic or racial or gender diversity or sexual orientation diversity, but we all, just like Doina was saying, we all bring different things to the table. And so I'm really keen on the concept of cognitive diversity, meaning that we're all better together because we do think differently and we want different perspectives to improve the business, to serve diverse clients, to make sure that we attract and retain people. So I feel like once the employer brand and the recruiting process are really honed on this new messaging of diversity, it's much easier to then apply that internally to the culture. One point that I would also like to make, and it's something that I saw in Accenture's presentation, which again was a very strong presentation in my mind with a lot of very actionable plans and details, was the fact that measurement is so critical to enforcing or at least keeping people accountable for delivering on diversity and inclusion goals. So, just like Accenture has this goal of 50-50 gender parity in their employee base, I think I'm seeing a lot of technology companies in Silicon Valley do the same. But these aren't just goals for a PR purpose. Hiring managers are being held to these numbers, and so are executives in these companies. And I think that's a really strong tool to ensure that that these things happen. Of course, training recruiters, training interviewers inside a company, and obviously training managers and employees when it comes to unconscious bias. There's now free trainings that a lot of technology companies have put out online to do this. There is, that there are types of trainings that aren't necessarily dogmatic or ideological, which I think a lot of people on the panel are a little bit scared off of, because sometimes these conversations about diversity can tend to sound like, we're trying to tell people how to think. And I think that's a really dangerous approach, because that's not really what this is about. This is just a good business practice that would allow us to be better and to win in the marketplace. And so I think internal communications also plays a huge role in building a diverse culture. And really what that means is being intentional about including messaging around diversity into almost everything that we do and everything that we say, and celebrating diversity. And in terms of tactics, because I know you've asked, and I'll promise I'll wrap up in a second. In terms of tactics, because you've asked to be specific so that companies that are with us today can actually implement some of these things. We need to have diverse speakers. The people that are talking to the company have to be diverse. And if the diversity doesn't exist at a visual level, at the leadership level, like you said, Andreea, yes, a lot of cisgender, heterosexual white men are in positions of power, and they have been for thousands of years. I think making sure that people are receiving the messaging from people that they can identify with is really critical. And that's not just about how you look, but also what you say and how you say it. And so between the employer brand, the recruiting process, the training and learning and development programs that you can implement, and revamping your internal communications approach or function to make sure that diversity and inclusion are top of mind, whatever and whenever we communicate. All of these underlined by a very clear approach in terms of metrics, goals, and accountability are key to building very strong cultural change in our organizations.
So if we were to summarize, let's say 3 to 5 things a company should do, because the bigger companies can hire someone who will advise them on these steps to take. But if you are a smaller company and you want to play your part, and you have a CEO of a startup, let's say, who says, okay, I want to be a part of the conversation, I want to do things better, etc., etc. Where do I start? What do I do? Let's say 3 to 5 steps that you would advise them to take, that they could write down today and implement in their business tomorrow. What would those steps be?
Are you asking me? Am I still on?
Yes, you are.
Excellent. All right. Well, I think first and foremost, I think putting down in writing what you want your culture and your policies around diversity and inclusion to look like is a critical first step, assuming that you yourself as the leader are really bought into this idea and you don't need any more persuading. And again, I don't think it's necessary to go and try to really over-engineer these things. I could go into a whole nother, off on another tangent about how it's really important to thoughtfully design diversity policies or diversity approach or diversity goals. But I think it really starts with putting pen to paper and having a clear sense of where you want to go. I've actually worked with a couple of founders, and the best approaches that I've seen are the ones where you imagine an ideal state. Where do we want to end up? What would it look like if our company was to be known as the most diverse, the most inclusive, the most open-minded, transparent, and I would say non-hierarchical company. This is something that a lot of technology companies like to achieve. It's not a culture that necessarily is desirable or works for every single company in the world, but in the technology sector, focused so much on attracting the best technical talent, and they typically share these kinds of values. I think that's a very critical part of the journey, of the diversity journey. I think the second piece that you need to do is put together a idea around what championing diversity looks like for your leadership team and your management team, and getting their buy-in. I think any founder that starts this journey alone is bound to fail. You have to get the buy-in of the people around you, especially in societies that are less open than Silicon Valley, for example, culturally, or even less diverse themselves. I mean, every society is diverse, but obviously there's a lot more diversity in some countries than others. And I'm talking here about racial and ethnic diversity. I think it's really important to tell managers and leadership why you're even spending time on this. And I think in societies like the ones that I just described, the ones that are less open, I think this is really a competitive advantage. And figuring out how you spell that out to people is really important, to the people that are on your team, why you think that it would be a competitive advantage from a people perspective, a client, or even business strategy perspective, to position yourself as one of the leading companies in your market for this. And then the third thing that I would probably do is I would open the conversation very widely to employees. In most technology companies these days, leaders have Q&A sessions with their employees where people can ask anything, and encouraging this kind of level of open, transparent conversation. I think it's really critical to diversity, because at the end of the day, even if every manager is accountable with numbers on diversity, we all should be championing. Every single employee should be bought in and championing diversity as a good business strategy, and it's something that is going to make them better and challenge them in their thinking.
And for, again, a smaller company, who should take it upon themselves to be the, let's say, the project manager for something like this? Because if you can't afford to hire, let's say, an HR manager or a diversity and inclusion manager, is it the CEO? Should there be someone on the team? Because, we can talk about wanting to be diverse and so on and having some general goals, but unless there's someone who's responsible, as you said earlier, as Serge said earlier, for that, then if you're not being held, nobody's being held accountable, then it's one of those situations where everybody assumes someone else will do something, and then maybe nothing gets done. So who would be the right person to champion that initiative?
I'll be very brief in this answer. I really strongly believe that culture begins at the very top, and that the accountability, like for anything else in a company, ends with the leadership team and the CEO or the founder. That said, I think it's really critical to constantly enforce messaging around the fact that there isn't one person in the company who basically has to deliver on diversity. We all have to deliver on diversity, not just in terms of hiring or retaining diverse people, but in the way that we approach our day-to-day interactions with clients, vendors, and our coworkers.
Thank you. You also had a point in your presentation that you were going to touch upon, and that is HR best practices and policies examples. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Tudor?
Well, again, because I've taken so much of the panel's time, I'll try to be brief. I think some interesting interesting innovations in the diversity space are, and this is applicable for larger companies, but the idea of the position, the function of a chief diversity officer, now reporting directly into the CEO. And that's definitely new. It used to be that diversity, when it first started, and it hasn't been a function that, Accenture was showing 1995 was the kickoff of when they were starting to look at it more seriously or in a more organized fashion. I'd say from that being some manager in HR's job, it is now a C-level position in some of the technology companies that I've been working with. I think the second innovation that I've seen, again, some of the panelists have already touched on, is the idea of these measurable goals, the idea that you try to set goals that are long-term and not try to make this into a one and done kind of approach. Just to give you a sense of how some of the companies that I work with are setting up these goals is we're looking at 5 to 10 year horizons. We are not trying to change people's minds. We're not trying to get our workforce to to change composition in terms of identity overnight. These are very, very long-term and must be really thoughtful approaches. And the third thing that I'll give as an example is how HR technology in particular is relating to the goals of diversity and trying to improve diversity and inclusion. And a lot of the HR technology companies that many of us use, be they Oracle or Workday or whatever else you use, are really focusing now on reporting and analysis for diversity, because obviously we're goaling people on these metrics, but also because governments and other institutions, for example, like NASDAQ, are now requiring companies to prove that they are diverse. And there's a lot more regulation being written, especially in the United States, where, for example, in California or to be listed on the exchanges in New York is now becoming a requirement for you to have a diverse board. And obviously the definition of diversity for those requirements varies dramatically, but it's very interesting to me to see that this is very much moving into the area of governmental regulation.
So that's another pillar that is likely very important, that there is legislation, that there is demand from stakeholders. And then there's, of course, the internal culture where people need companies to move in a certain direction. Are there any other pillars?
If you don't mind, I'll open it up to the rest of the panel to make sure that others get a chance to
we still have time, Tudor. Don't worry, we still have time. Okay. So we would love to grill you a little bit more on this. So
okay. Other pillars. I mean, at this stage, I think one of the hardest things to do is to recruit for board diversity. Honestly, I have a couple of clients that are trying very, very hard to bring diverse board members into the boardrooms, diverse people at leadership levels. I think it's a really hard challenge, and most of this really falls on the shoulders of the learning and development organization, because and parts of the HR team that work on performance management systems. And because all of this really ties, in order for someone to be eligible for a board position, which is sort of the crowning achievement of many people's careers, you don't get to be a board member from being an individual contributor level 2 in a company. You have had to climb the corporate ladder, so to say, or be someone of outstanding academic achievement. But my point is, it takes every single step. We were talking about the employee life cycle. Performance management systems, promotion policies, or approaches to how we promote people, how we develop them, are also really critical, because you're not going to see a ton of women in leadership, a ton of LGBTQ people in leadership, if you're not intentionally targeting and developing the best people to make it there. And I think when you are, the sort of the bottom line here, the entry ticket into this part of the employee life cycle really is around the metrics, and making sure that at every single performance review cycle, at every single compensation cycle, every single promotional cycle, you take a very close look to who is being promoted, who is being given the highest ratings, performance ratings, and obviously, whether or not you're compensating the, let's say, predominant group in power more than the minorities or the categories of people that are traditionally discriminated against. And you can get very sophisticated with this kind of analysis. Obviously, if you look at Google, Facebook, Microsoft, they're publishing a lot of this diversity data. And I highly encourage everybody to go read the diversity reports that annually are printed by these organizations, to really look at what sort of best-in-class approaches look like. I think you learn a lot from these reports, and it could inform some of the policies and approaches that you put together.
Thank you, Tudor. Before I go on to Serge, our next speaker, I'd like to remind everyone that there is a chat at the bottom of your screens. Please feel free to ask questions. And of course, as mentioned before, all the other panelists, if you want to add something to what your fellow panelists are saying, please feel free to. We want to learn from your experience. That's why we're here today. So please do not hesitate to jump in if you have something to add. Or if you disagree, that would make the conversation quite interesting. Serge offers for ING Romania inclusion in multinational organizations and including people with disability in the workplace.
Thank you. Yeah, let me start maybe with a bit of a personal introduction, because I always find it interesting. People talk about D&I, but where does the interest come from? And I think for me, when I look back and look back at my own life, I think for me the belongingness is a very critical part. And although sometimes people say, okay, you're a Dutch male. I mean, I hear some people say the white male boardroom. So I feel like I'm a little bit like the endangered species in the discussion, although I don't feel like this. But I think everybody in its life encounters moments when they feel that they do not belong. And I, for instance, had it when I was very young, and I tried to integrate into a new school, and I felt very much not fitting in. I still remember how lonely I felt and how difficult I felt. And somehow this is just something that has always stuck with me and been in the back of my mind, that whatever I do in my life, I want nobody to feel like this due to my hands. And I would like to be able to actually contribute for people to feel welcome, to feel that they fully belong and that they're part of a bigger group. And this is how I became foremost on belongingness and a little bit of fairness into being one of the people in ING that is championing the D&I. I am not an HR person. I'm a CFO. Maybe that is the furthest away you can get maybe from the topic. I am not a business person, but I took it on myself in ING Romania to bring this topic to the table, because it was something which I felt was not discussed enough. And I think when I look at ING in a totality, we have this topic on our radar already since the earlier 2000s. It comes from our desire to actually look at the fundamental rights of people. So initially it started with treating people right, not financing child labor and all those type of stuff. And then we started with how do we actually include? And in the early 2000s, we started with women equality, LGBTs, and it has grown over time. And for me, being one of the founding members of the Diversity Chamber in Romania is another way that we are actually evidencing that we really care about this. I think caring for me is getting involved and also sticking out your neck, not walking away for what are sometimes more difficult discussions. Because I also sometimes feel that if I look at the diversity chamber, the pillars gender is quite okay. Everybody loves it. People with disabilities is also safe. But when you come in LGBT and especially Roma topics and ethnicity, the discussions can become a little bit more difficult. And I also want to thank everybody on the panel who is here to speak. I think it's great to see such a diversity of people sharing their minds, and a big thank you for all the people that are participating. If I look at how we're trying in ING to look at diversity, we're present in 40 countries, more than 50,000 employees. So for us, what really binds it, and we touched upon the culture, but for us, it's really embedded in the Orange Code. And the Orange Code explains what it means to be ING, what our values are, what our behaviors are. And one of there are two elements there that are critical. One is helping others to be successful, which actually means always standing next to your colleagues, also helping them to fit in and belong, and to actually dare to challenge. And I think this is the other side of not being silent and also addressing when you see undesirable behavior. And earlier on, Andreea, you touched upon, what do you do if you see a behavior that is not being addressed or that is poor? I think thinking a little bit about a quote of Martin Luther King, and I hope I actually quote him properly, but he said something along the lines that in the end, we will not remember the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And for me, this is extremely profound because it's also about what it means to change diversity and inclusion in a company. It's not about standing for me on a stage and saying we need to be diverse. It is much more having the willingness when you see things that are not going well to stand up and actually address it with those colleagues. I think these are the moments in time by showing what is not acceptable that you can have a very bigger and much bigger impact than by saying what you want. Because in the end, everybody will listen and say, but I'm not the problem. I'm the guy who likes everybody. So it starts with us with the Orange Code, and we have translated this in the Code of Conduct. And in the Code of Conduct, we have 10 principles, but one of them, and for me that is a very important one, it's about making sure everybody has a safe working environment in the broadest sense of the word. And this means that for people to be safe, they need to be able to take their whole self to work. They should not be exposed to bullying. They should not be exposed to gossiping. They should be able to be comfortable who they are at work at all times. And we have seen, and I will not try to repeat the very good points made by the prior panelists, but we see this is a very big determinant of retention of key staff, employee engagement, but also mental well-being and strong performance. So for us, this is something that is a very big part. And then maybe just to do the step a little bit to, do we do this not only for that, because we find it's morally right, people are more engaged. And we have come to the conclusion at ING that in the end, it's essential for delivering on our strategy. And I think Tudor raised a very, very important point when he was talking about the cognitive part. But for us to stay a step ahead, we need to have teams, and we're working more and more agile, that have a healthy mix of contrasting perspective and backgrounds, because they have proven to be more creative, faster to adapt, and more innovative with their solutions. And being a bank that is digital and driven by innovation, we have seen that the diverse teams actually help us to drive our strategy and to better support our clients. And this is something we're building more and more on. And maybe just to touch slightly upon the other topic, and I'm adjusting a bit my speech, giving time and everything that was said. But we also see it's the recruitment part and the selection part. And what we have noticed now, and this is what is going on more and more, and I look at the Financial Times, I look at Bloomberg, I look at Worldwide Pride, you are seeing that just like when it comes to financial indices, sustainability indices, people start to report not only on are you a top employer, which was previously what we were monitoring, and if people said you're a great employer, we were very happy, but also are you diverse enough? And we see that this is determining more and more the way people select if they want to work at a company, if they want to do business with a company, but also if they want to be a client of a company. So although on the one hand we are, and I'm not going to raise all the awards that we have won last year, but those awards for us are much more a leading indicator of being able to recruit the people in all the different talent pools and also get clients from those talent pools. Now, then maybe, because I think in our pre-discussion, you asked me, what are you practically doing? So I will try to shift a little bit, what are we practically doing? And everybody who wants to interrupt me, please do so. I have no problem with that. What we have done is we have translated this a couple of years ago in what we call the 70-30 rule. And what we're trying to do is make sure that all our teams are diverse, that there is a 70-30 mix. So nobody should be less than 30%. And the idea is a little bit that if you have 30% of representation from a diversity point of view, it helps on the inclusion. Because it seems to be a little bit the tipping point that you can have influence, you feel comfortable, and you can have your voice heard and you can have influence. Now we're measuring that primarily on big topics like nationality, gender, age groups. For instance, in the Netherlands, age discrimination is still something that's very important. However, the way that we are implementing this, it goes much further. So when we have the discussion on recruitment, and I will touch upon that later, it's also looking at backgrounds, skill sets, way people act, because we believe that these are probably even more important and more driving how people would fit in the teams. And as a bank, we are much on risk management. And one of the new elements that is being introduced is the behavioral risk assessments that we're doing, where we're actually looking at how does diversity of opinion work in practice, and are we making the right decisions by having everybody able to voice their opinions, provide their input, and take the right decisions. And this is going to be, even from a regulatory point of view, I see, for instance, the Dutch Central Bank finding this critically important because it very much determines the quality of decision making. Now that's nice, you have the targets, but how do you then change people act? And that's why we are focusing a lot on continuous training. And what we have, and I will focus on two, we have banking for inclusion, where all the senior management goes through unconscious bias trainings with actors, where you're actually role playing and you get scenes where you can see people acting in a non-diverse way, which is being discussed, but you're also exposed to these type of discussions yourself and tested. How do you react in those type of situations? I like it a lot. I think it's sometimes very confrontational. And then furthermore, we have e-learnings and further courses when it comes to unconscious biases, but also self-awareness, because I think it also starts with how well do you know yourself? And I think anybody who tells me that they're free of biases, I don't trust. I have biases myself. Sometimes I'm ashamed to admit it, but I also in certain cases catch myself saying things, this is bias. Why do I say this? Or why do I include something like this? And then we also have quality of hire programs. And it's a program that we have also tested in Romania. And there we're really trying to get into a hiring process where we select the right candidates, but we try to reduce as much as possible all reasons of biases. So it can be blind, but it's also different testing models. And we're really trying to find a way via structured interviews in a structured process to make sure this doesn't play a role. It was piloted in Romania, again, something which I'm very proud, and it is now being rolled out to 5 other countries. Maybe touching upon the topic as well that you made from, do you have candidates? And I really believe many times I hear it as well. Sorry, sir, we don't have candidates. I sometimes get a pool, I get 4 men or I get 5 women. And then the question is, why is this not diverse? We couldn't find anybody. I don't trust it. I don't buy it. You can always find a mixed pool if you try. But I think this is where it's not only HR that should play a role, but I think it's also about yourself in how do you actually engage and that you try to find those type of candidates. And my personal experience is it might take a little bit longer, but you can always find a diverse pool of candidates. And you can always find them if it's really your goal. And sometimes I believe it's easy to say, I have a list of candidates and I feel comfortable with it. But I see more and more in ING that we're being pushed, rightfully so, to make sure that mix is there. And sometimes it's difficult because I also know that as being a white, middle-aged Dutch male, I'm not the person that is scoring highest on the diversity list there. And many times, sometimes, and I see this is a frustration that I sometimes see among peers, the choice is for female candidates, foreign candidates. And I think this is also something what we need to distinguish between positive discrimination and positive affirmation. And I think we should avoid saying we need a female or we need to have a person that is colored. But I think we should think about it that in the team dynamic, it is much more important for the team to function with having that diversity in there and not having 10 the same people around the table. It might feel very comfortable, but it's not the right way to build the teams. But sometimes I have the feeling that we tend to go too much towards positive discrimination, which creates just resentment, instead of actually helping to create a foundation for further diversity and inclusion. And that is also why I personally believe role models are critical. I consider myself a role model, but I also look around, I see female role models. I've worked for many talented ladies. We have a person in the board now just appointed, which has a disability. We have ladies in the board from different ethnicities. So I really think these are the people that need to stand up. And I can only echo what Tudor mentioned earlier. It really starts at the top, but it cannot start from the top because you believe it's a marketing gimmick or you believe it's the right thing to say politically. If you don't believe in it, I really believe this will boomerang back and people will see you as dishonest, fake. And I think you will just get the reverse and people will only mistrust you more. And this is why for us, what I try to do myself as well, we actually try to find ambassadors in the company. And this is sometimes very difficult because we try to find people that are willing to be the front runners in this, to represent their different groups, be open. And I think for us, tone from the top is important, but supporting those people that expose themselves and actually driving and showing the diversity is key. And I think this is where we need to protect them, help them and support them. And we have now 20 or so international employee networks, ranging from disabilities, LGBT, ethnicity, but also, for instance, we have recently opened one for transgenders, which is one of our new ones. And I'm very proud, if you look at our ING website, they're even on our website with bringing your whole self to work. I found it so inspiring that a young transgender dared to have their story publicly on an international website of the bank. But this creates so much energy because people see that they can be open and that they can take the step. And we just had an interview with her explaining the positive, but also sometimes the negative responses that come on that.
Dankjewel, Serge. I think I have to stop you because I think we only have about 10 minutes left of our official time. And I really want to go to Doina because I want to get a little word in about the gender pay gap. We started with that. I would love to develop it a bit more. Before you start on your presentation, Doina, there is a question that I would like to address from the audience. They say, how can we get the conversation started at our companies in Romania on Roma and LGBT? And actually, I think we can expand that to all the topics that we've discussed today. I'm originally Dutch, based in Germany, working for a global company, and feel the tension when I bring this up with our HR team in Romania. I do not want to come across as the Western European telling the Romania team how to behave. Any thoughts? If you could quickly touch upon that, and then I would love to see your presentation.
Sorry, Andreea.
Can you hear me, Doina?
It's a little bit difficult for me. I don't know. I have technical issues. Oh. I think it's not from the network for sure. It's from the microphone that I have on the computer. It's not from the network. So, Andreea, do you expect me to give an answer now, or do you prefer to? I think that I can elaborate more on this question. You can send me my email, and I can continue to discuss about it with whom. Address the question.
Can I ask? I have the presentation. Apologies. This is Perry. Can you see it?
Okay. Yes.
Can you see the presentation?
Yeah.
It's not.
Okay,
it's
good.
Open it.
Perry, you haven't opened it.
Okay. Let me stop the share and try again. Sorry.
Technology is not our friend today.
No.
Good, okay now?
Yes.
Okay.
Start with the third one. It's very hard for me to be the last one. To be the last one after Yolanda, after Ivan, after Traian, after Serge. A lot of lovely things. And I thank you very much for everything you have shared. Ivan, I love the word journey. Yes, it's about the journey. It's not about an action standalone. It's not about something that we should do today or tomorrow or only for 1 month. It's about the story and the journey that should be part of our life day by day. I'm quite new in Orange, Romania. I have only 24 years, so I'm quite new. I want to tell you that many years ago, when I heard about diversity inclusion program from the group, I was a little bit confused, a little bit surprised, not confused, sorry, surprised. Why about diversity? Because what is happening in our company is so natural. It's our spirit. Then I realized that we need to speak loud about it to help people to express themselves. Now, I would like to share with you the fact that we have a very good and integrated policy at the group level, which is communicated, and each country has a program dedicated to implement the pillars of diversity and inclusion. You can see here what are the main themes of each pillar. I understood that you received the presentation, so you will have enough time to see. It's about the accessibility, about the digital inclusion, personal opinions, and a lot of other things. Now, I'm the person who will discuss about measuring, about numbers. I would like to speak a lot about diversity. I honestly like diversity because I'm a free spirit. If I want to walk without shoes in the rain on Victoria Boulevard, I will do it. So I like the free spirit, I like the diversity. Now, I will go back to the objective that I have for this presentation. It's about the metrics. So without measuring, we cannot to act. We cannot to identify where the gaps are, what we should do, what is the segmentation on which we have, what are the segments on which we have to act to do concrete things. So this is why the measuring is very important. But before the measuring, as the previous as Yolanda said, as Ivan said, we have to establish a set of KPIs. We have to have an end state and to have on the table of the board an assumption and targets that we want to achieve. So we have targets, let's follow, let's monitor the evolution. So here I have the image starting with 2017 till 2020, how we improve our KPIs on the main pillars that we have established to be monitored. It's about distribution of responsibility. And now looking at looking over the period between 2017 and 2018, we can see how balanced we are on the managerial positions. Doesn't matter that we are talking about the team coordinators, about the senior managers, about the middle managers. We are continue to increase. We have only a small decrease in top management, but it's this is because of increasing the number of the divisions. And some reorganizations within the company. So what is our spirit? We offer tools and development opportunities. We offer everything. We have offer free access for everybody. Be free to choose what you need. Be free to choose what you like to do. And we are here to give you the support. So the next one, so this is the distribution of responsibility. The next one, which is very important, is the seniority. We spoke about new generations. I will speak about the mix of generations because we need all the generations on board. So, but to adopt a mix of new competencies, a mix of diverse behaviors, a mix of ideas, of open ideas discussed, is very important to look at all the clusters, all the age clusters. So if you can see at the distribution by seniority age, sorry, a range, meaning the seniority within the company, you can see that we are very, our employees are very loyal and are very engaged. You can see how the average seniority is increasing over the period. We have to be very pragmatic and accept the fact that this mix is it's also supported by the level of attrition. If you don't have attrition, you cannot force people to leave in the company because you want to replace with somebody who has a different age or, but what was happening naturally was very good, and the figures looks great. Now let's look at the next slide. It's about another KPI. There is anybody to help me, please? Okay, distribution by age, because I started to talk about age, but what I had on the slide was the seniority in the company. So about the age, you can see how balanced we are. We are very homogeneous. We accept and we embrace all types of generations. And it's normal because it's about the technology. The young people are very attracted about the technologies, and we are growing. We are continue to growing as long as our business is growing. We have more opportunities to hire people, and when we are talking the technologies, you know how much the young people are attached by the new devices, by new technologies. So we are very attractive from this perspective, because the technology is very is developing very fast. So, and they are very curious. So looking over the period, we can see an increase on 2024 years scale Also, we can see a distribution on women and male on each cluster, because it's very important. It's not only about the segmentation by age, but it's also about the proportion of women and proportion on female on each cluster is very important. So we combine different KPIs to have a clear perspective. The next one, so it's the age. The next one, please. The next KPI. Okay, about department, it's very important because we are working in technology sector, in telecommunication. Yes, it's true, but our the mix of departments is very nice, because we have a huge proportion of sales, but also we have a technology center for the group, where we have around 650 people working for IT, especially, and we have our technology department, we have our IT department, and we know that in Romania there are not enough women who want to make IT or telecommunication universities. So what we do now is to be very present in universities, is to be very present in different associations, to support women to have the courage to make these steps, because because there are a lot of women with who has a desire, who want to be an IT expert, but they don't dare to do that. And this is why we have developed a development program within the company. iDigital is named iDigital, and it's very nice because a lot of women made the trainings, and now they are RPA developers. So it's not only about what you can do outside, but also looking at what you have inside, looking at the potential, making a profiling, understanding if you have or not rooms for improvement inside. So we continue to, and we fight here to have more women on board in technology and in IT. And thanks to the international mobility program across the group, we attract more women now, and I think that we will succeed in increasing the number of female in this area. But it's important to follow by department to see what is the mix. The next one, please, Andreea. Okay, this is diversity of generations. We already talked about it. It's another way of showing the data. I think that we should speak now about the pay gap, because I love it. In internal dynamics, also a KPI, how many people, how many women were promoted. It's about equal opportunity. So let's skip this. So pay gap analysis, because we don't have enough time, and I think this is a hot topic for you. In fact, Andreea, I see that you agree on that.
It's a very interesting topic.
Pay gap, yes. Pay gap analysis. this is an item, this is a pillar on which the group, Orange Group, started to work on 15 years ago. With 15 years ago, we received a guideline and a small tool about how to measure the pay between women and men between different generations. On a yearly basis, the CMB committee from the group has added different new perspectives. Now we have a new tool, an improved one, which is very good. It's not something very sophisticated. This has been created in Excel with advanced skills in Excel by a woman. So we have the opportunity to select the criteria which are very close to the culture of each country. For example, if we want to compare Africa, country in which we are operating in Africa with Romania, for example, we will see different comparison, and it's normal because it's about the culture. Women has not enough access to work, to have a job. Now, looking at Romania, looking at the legislation, the women can stay 2 years with children in the parental leave. 2 years. During the 2 years spent at home, they lose some, they do not have same opportunity with women who are presented to the office during this period. And we have to be focused on how we embark women when they are coming back from the parental leave. And it could be a detractor in pay gap because men, usually the men don't take parental leave, or they took a short time. They are working all the time. So this is differentiator. This is an influence on pay gap. Also, what we have observed is the fact that for a woman, a period needs to access on the higher position, on the higher level. It's longer than for a man. So we have to take into consideration all the influencers and then to have a comparable basis to see what is the real situation. So now, looking in 2018, if we take direct comparison, what we have extract from the payroll, okay, we see minus 14%. Okay, let's isolate the influencers. Let's make a comparable basis, and we can see a real gap of minus 7.3%. What I want to tell you is that when you are measuring, you have to be sure that you have an equal representation of men and women in your database. And you should select the main influencers in order to have a comparable basis. Now, this is sorry?
So sorry to interrupt you. I think we're very close to the end of the webinar. And actually, because what you're saying is so important and interesting, I would like to suggest that perhaps we do an interview with you specifically on this topic, because I'm sure our attendees would love to hear more. And you have so much incredible data that I think because of a technical issue, people can't really see. So we'll share your presentation. Shall we create something on the RDCC website specifically on this topic and share with the attendees so that they actually get the maximum of your insights rather than rushing you through it now? Wonderful.
Why not?
Well, I will get in touch with you, shoot over some questions. We'll have this wonderful presentation attached to that article, and that way I can invite Lestat back to say a few words for the end of the webinar, and we can perhaps wrap up here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Doina. Thank you, Andreea, and all our speakers. I'm very happy to this conversation that we had with our guests today. I mean, if there is something that we have to keep in mind, I think diversity is an asset. It's our strength. It's a sustainable future for a more inclusive society. Only together, I think we can build a workplace which is going to be free of discrimination, of exclusion, of stereotypes. The important is to remember that all differences in experience, in ideas, in thoughts, in knowledge, are going to make our workplaces more innovative, more efficient, and more profitable. Diversity is an asset. Diversity, it's our asset to change. Let's not commit just to diversity on a simple piece of paper and tick the box. I invite you all to take a bolder stand to diversity by joining the chamber, the Diversity Chamber of Commerce, and together we will commit to a concrete action and act about it. Thank you
so much, Lestat. We've had 5 wonderful speakers with us today: Yolanda, Umpiérrez, Alvarez of Accenture, Ivan Janković of Ikea, Tudor Havrilyuk of formerly of Facebook, Serge of ING Romania, and Doina Filip of Orange Romania. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to the attendees. You will find a number of articles based on this webinar on the RDCC website, which is rdcc.raw, and on our social media. If we didn't get to your questions, apologies. We had a lot of topics to cover. We will liaise with our speakers and publish their answers on our website. You will also receive a newsletter with highlights from this webinar over the next few days. Until next time, thank you all and stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.